So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about product teams in a time of flux. And of course, with the rise of AI, all the different changes that we've seen in the market, a lot has happened. And we've just learned from the amazing presentation of Abby that it sometimes requires a bit of superpowers to actually succeed in this changing or rapidly changing time, I have to say. So maybe we can start by just asking, do you guys recognize that there's a lot going on? And if so, what is the superpower that you would say is the one thing that is helping you adapt to this change? Maybe Hanneke, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think first off, I'm not a product owner, so I'll speak a bit from the design discipline. I was one of the few hands here. Yeah, definitely. I think as products, we talk about platforms, we talk about ecosystems, get way more complex. I think it's very important to indeed, as a team, be flexible, but also I really like to, what was just addressed, to really co-create and work together. And I think one of the old tools as a designer that I apply quite often is the classic design thinking. Not only to identify the customer problem or the offer that we want to establish, but I think it's also very powerful to as teams to really co-create together, get the different perspectives in, and really prioritize based on different disciplines on what the direction is. Yeah.
Yeah, and is the double diamond that we've just heard about also something that you use within IKEA?
Yeah, definitely. That's a classic, and yeah.
Thanks. Heather, how is that for you at Elsevier? Is it similar that you see?
There's quite a bit of overlap and similarity there as well. I would say that probably one of the superpowers that I would bring in might be humility. I also come from a UX background, and I recognize that there's always something that I don't know or perhaps got wrong. Often questioning what are we trying to get done here? Or how are we going to get from where we are right now to the outcome that we want to create?
Perfect, thanks. Thomas, last but not least, what's your superpower that you're using to navigate through this rapidly changing times?
Yeah, I think the curiosity piece really resonated with me. I think that's kind of the one. It can be a bit training to kind of stay on top of things and what's happening. So it's probably a bit about kind of setting up kind of this rivers that one can tap into to stay up to date. But I think it's also a lot about kind of being curious about what's happening out there and getting your hands dirty and kind of. And I was recently in Tuscany, and I was in Florence, and it was in one of the churches where basically everybody famous in Italy is buried. And I wanted to read the Latin inscript, but I never had Latin. And I just downloaded the ChatGPT app, took a photo, and it translated it perfectly. And I was like, oh, that's nice. That was a really good reason for me to finally download it. I was kind of hesitant to do it before. I used it on the web, but I didn't want to have it on my phone. And I was like, okay, I think this can do it. I just tried it out, and it worked. And I think that kind of curiosity to see how you can do it in your daily life, how it works, I think that's something that we should all try to make time for as well.
Yeah, so we will touch upon that later, how AI has not only impacted your life, but also the life of your product teams, potentially. What I'm curious about, we've just seen a bit of the Mickey Mouse or Mandela, I have to say, the different rules or the different visions that we have within a product team. How is that for your organizations? I know Heather, you've also have a good background in UX. Would you say it's a crucial component of a product team to also have that experience in there? Or
You mean the AI experience?
Yeah.
No. I think being curious about learning what the advantages of it can be is crucial. But I'd heard several people say throughout the day, like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and is AI the right tool for solving that problem? It kind of resonates with sort of where we're practicing product at Elsevier.
So what would you say are the crucial components of or the different roles or perspectives of a product team to succeed within Elsevier, for example?
Yeah, questioning what problem is it that we're trying to solve. I think product has always been in flux since I've been in the field. Change has been the one constant that we've got. So not taking for granted that the problem that we started out solving is still the same problem that we're solving today. Users' needs are evolving, and making sure that we're evolving with those needs. So I guess going back to your curiosity comment, and very crucial.
Perfect. Hanneke, how is it within IKEA Group?
Yeah, it's definitely in flux. IKEA started more or less here in Amsterdam a year or 3 ago, a digital group, brand new, basically with the challenge to transform the classic brick and mortar, we call them the blue boxes at the stores that I think everyone knows, into a digital experience, which is quite a challenge because I think as a brand value we have quite a strong brand and people recognize it, but how do we translate that into a digital product? So it was a fast investment in it, and we grew within 3 years to 800 people. So it's a bit of trial and error, to be very honest. We're working indeed with the product teams. We call them PEDX teams, so it's indeed the component products, engineering, data, and experience. And as we go, we evolve, but indeed those Venn diagrams are leading, and I think one of the things that we're really trying to experiment with is indeed to really give a challenge on are we solving a problem rather than are we just grouping features. And I think the agility and from a design perspective, especially from strategic design, I think the continuous discovery that we have, like are we really having the right problem of a customer? Are we looking into the future? I think that's an interesting point that, to be frank, we maybe haven't figured out in a classic org structure yet, but I think that's a crucial, interesting role to really make sure that you keep your eyes on the ball and solve a true problem. That's meaningful.
Almost like reverse engineering then, that you start from the problem of the end user and then...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thomas, how is that at Personio? Is that something that you see as well there?
Yeah, I think something that I wanted, that I think is quite crucial that Abby mentioned, but I think almost in passing, that I think is very important in the product team is that understanding not only of the problem, but of the priority of the problem, and that kind of, that stack rank, I think you call it that stack rank, and then the go priorities or go problems. I think that is a very crucial piece that in the product team, you kind of have this overlap not only on kind of what you're working on, the 60-70%, but also on why that top thing is a top thing. And I think it's a bit of the role of product to kind of drive a bit of that clarity there so that everybody's understanding that. But I think that to me is like a very crucial piece that you not only know what is the problem that we're solving for, but also why is this a big problem for the user, but also why is it relevant to us as a business to actually focus on this, and kind of how do you stack rank this, and how do you maybe find a mix of, if you stack rank it and you kind of plot it on the timeline, does that make sense for where you want to get in a year? Is that a good mix of maybe some table stakes stuff, maybe some differentiators that you want to bring? So I think that is a core piece, and I think it also speaks to the kind of change that's happening in the design world about like UX getting on the table. I think that is something that I hope we see even more of, that kind of understanding of the business sense of that priority transpires across the whole team. But I think it's easy to say for product people to say like, oh, the UX people need to understand this, but I think there's also a lot that we need to do to make that understandable and help people understand how we make money, and why is that a priority and how are things going. Yeah.
Yeah, Heather, how is that at Elsevier? I know, it's indeed a bridge function, as we've just at least understood. Like, it's really making the translation, making very explicit why certain choices are being made. Is there a framework that you guys apply that you want to share with the audience here today?
I'm thinking about the word framework.
We can also leave the word framework out of it.
No, it's quite okay. I think we're quite a big company in comparison to where you're at, but there's a lot of similarities in how we're doing work as well. You know, the prioritization, it's probably the one framework that we rely on for this, and in the constant conversation around prioritization. It is non-stop. It's probably almost every day. In the communication with stakeholders on what we're doing and why we're still doing something and why we're going to stop something else. That's probably one of the biggest frameworks that we've got, and I think that relationship, not just within the team, but back to the stakeholders, that conversation is something that I appreciate more and more every day as well.
Okay. So we've been talking about, like, indeed, product teams are in a time of flux. We've seen the role of AI a bit, prioritization. What are now specific skills that you would say a product manager or someone within that product team really needs? I've heard about stakeholder management, making proper translation, prioritization, but what are the superpowers or the skills that someone really needs? What would you say within IKEA group that is really needed to be successful in this changing time, of course?
Yeah. I think when we talk about AI, it's such an intangible thing. I mean, we talked about it, it's a tool, but what does it really impact in people's lives and what are the solutions you're making with it? I think I really like the zoom in, zoom out point that was just made. I think it's important around trying to really understand in a product vision, like what are the bigger goals of quite often things that we are building on our ecosystem. So we add smaller solutions and it grows, but you have a bit of a dot on the horizon. And I think the ability to kind of keep that strategy in mind and know where you're after, and then translating that back into today and the nitty-gritty details. I think especially also with AI in terms of, are we getting the right data? And do we have a strategy in place to be able to deliver the value that we envision? And are we start building that? So I think it's a bit this ecosystem, macro, micro type of thinking that is very crucial in this. Yeah.
Perfect. Thomas, do you have an example of how that goes within Personio?
Example?
But you were successful, of course. That's what we want to share with the audience.
I was thinking about the superpowers, and I think for a product manager, and then I'll talk about the superpower and then how it applies to Personio. I think for a product manager, one of the superpowers is kind of being aware of what situation you're in, and mostly what situation your company is in. So, for example, for Personio, we're an HR startup with 2,000 people since 2015, so startup in air quotes. But for us, the goal of the company is growth. It's growth through logos, and we're very transparent about it, which is one of the things that I really love about it. But it also means clearly as a company, that's set out, and as a PM, you should be receptive of that, and you should think about what that means for your product, and what that means, for example, in my case is I'm leading a new product that we recently launched, and it means that clearly a lot of the focus that I'm currently spending on is on supporting in the go-to-market motion, for example, right? So working with our product marketing manager, working with our sales colleagues to see how do we best explain what we have, how do we best position this, and it's probably not a core product manager responsibility, but in the context that we're in, I'm contributing to that goal. Yes, there's also a piece of picking the right features so that we can set out that we have the right stack rank of problems to solve. I think that plays a role to it, but in our context, it's, okay, we need growth. How does growth happen? It's a B2B SaaS, so it happens through people going out selling it, for us capturing marketing leads and converting them. So, okay, that means for me, I need to go dig in, understand this funnel, work with those people. And for example, also means that I don't care about retention at the moment. Kind of deprioritize that. But I think kind of being aware of that, I would say, is one of the superpowers, and getting that across to the teams or the team that you work with as well. Yeah.
Heather, how do you guys keep the? How did you guys extract the information from the end users? Is there an approach that you use to make sure that whatever you guys create is indeed what is also requested by your end users?
Yes, I'm quite fortunate that user experience is a very important, valued skill set at the company. So most of the squads that we have do get to work with a dedicated or at least a shared user experience person. But we're not relying wholly on just UX for the qual. But there's a lot of the tools like Pendo, which we have in many of our products, where that gives us a touch point, a pulse of what's happening, as well as are what they tell us they're doing actually what they're doing, converting to the KPIs that we're measuring all the time. And I think going back to the superpowers that you were asking about that we're looking for in a product manager, it's being comfortable with learning about the data. I'm not a maths person, so getting comfortable with KPIs and data was something I really grew into. But I think it's really quite important that you overcome any of those insecurities and get into the data and make sure that it's going in the direction that you're trying to get it to.
Or even going, I was just getting a bit envious. We don't have user researchers in every pod anymore, and kind of our user research team actually rebranded to Insights, which is on a bit more strategic level. And I think this is one of the things that changed for us, and when we talk about influx, is that it's now down to the actual designers and product managers to do a lot of the kind of on-the-ground work. And maybe also to a certain degree, I don't know, might be a bit controversial, but we're on a panel anyway. I think kind of also build up product sense and then just ship it instead of over product prototype testing and validation. And I think that was kind of a bit of the messaging that went with this shift of in the past, we've kind of over-indexed on making sure that what we ship is perfectly validated and perfectly usable, and going a bit more with, let's have the product sense, let's maybe have internal dog fooding, I think was mentioned as well. We're lucky we can do that. And then kind of use that as a way to learn for us, and we can always iterate and improve, but that making that trade-off of saying, are we shipping like the last 20% versus can we just ship the first 80%? I think that was a very interesting push for us as a company. I will say the one piece that went hand in hand with it was hiring a bit more senior product and design people, so that you can kind of trade off that.
But that's good though, right? Like knowing like what's good enough, not making it, there's no perfection in product management.
Yeah, and it's very funny, I'm kind of laughing to myself. I recently saw a document that now we're introducing a design review step before stuff gets shipped, and it's meant to kind of cover the next 3 to 4 months. And it's like, wait, are we going to stage gate stuff now? But it is actually, when I look back and now you talk about it, it is exactly about this kind of having a more structured approach for senior folks to kind of chime in and maybe point out things. And I think it's kind of also flipping how you think about it. It's not about correcting you, it's about helping you and helping the product in the end. So yeah.
It's almost like fail fast, learn faster. Like if you just push it, then you might learn from it instead of waiting for it to be perfect. Is that something that you guys do at IKEA as well, or is there a very strict stage gate kind of process that you use for product development?
Yeah, definitely. I think Hannah from anyone that was actually here helped IKEA a lot with identifying that product. We call it the DNS, but it's effectively indeed the double diamond. Depends a bit where you sit. I usually work a little bit more on strategy and really early innovation. So at that time, it's not landed in a roadmap yet. It's not necessarily even owned by a business or a product owner. So it's a kind of a repetition of the two. But we have various ways to start internally and externally validating. Usually, in the beginning, as a business designer, you also really look at the strategic imperatives of your company and the new growth areas. That's so more like a business perspective, but then also looking at trends, what's going on outside. Sometimes even starting with not even a product focus, but a very open interview around how do you move homes, for example. Just very much trying to explore what are opportunities for IKEA. And then I think you usually see a bit that you repeat the double diamond in that sense. So from a very fluffy one going to a concrete value proposition that's quite North Star-y and more speaks to the imagination. So when we just talked about socializing your product, it's more to get people excited, to get a bit of a dot on the horizon. This is where we're going at. And I think then we enter again those double diamonds to really market and product and start piloting the ideas that we have. Yeah.
And do you then sometimes also encounter the situation where the end user or the final buyer in this case doesn't know what they want, or that you have a very different perspective or view on it? Because of course, if we ask about a problem, then it might be very creative to solve it. But if you really ask for a product, then how do you stay creative or innovative in that sense?
And I think here maybe is also a moment to advocate also a bit for really good design research. Which is sometimes also different than UX research. So I think the art sits really in observing, asking the right questions, not too suggestive on a product. So I think if you fulfill that process well, and you have the right capabilities in your team, I think for early explorations and innovations, there's a non-suggestive way to start exploring really what the ideas are. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Yeah, we've seen, of course, also the impact AI has made on product teams, but also in general. How is that for you, Heather? How has AI, for example, impacted your product operating model, for example, or how you productionize?
I don't feel like it's been that big of an impact. I feel like it's a very available technology now. We are certainly experimenting with it. We've had some hackathons now in the company where we're exploring like how well does it solve various problems? What of our problems? What is it best suited toward? Certainly we've tried things out in the early days where we experimented with making OKRs with them, and that was a lot of fun. But we've kind of backed away and evolved away from that. But I think I said a little bit earlier, our use of Gen AI in particular tends to follow along like, is it the best technology for solving any particular problem that we're working on? We're using various different forms of AI and have been for a very long time, and I expect we'll continue using Gen AI similar as we would any other technology.
Can you give an example on how you have been using it? You said we use it in several ways. Is it then mainly for the creative components or also for the more administrative OKR kind of tasks? Or
yeah, so there's probably different types of Gen AI that we're using. So there's like, the company Gen AI that I probably shouldn't talk about, where we kind of have that version. But then there are maybe some more creative, like with the use of, for some prototypes, for example, we've used it to create some basic prototypes to help accelerate some things, and then we'll code review that and go further. Graphical design, copy as well.
Did that work?
It's funny you should ask. I did that for my bio here, and I think I iterated it about 20 more times on top of it to get it to where I want. And then it's like, okay.
But it provides a good starting point, right?
But it provides a starting
point. We had
point.
it for our content writers, and I think we canceled it after 5 months. And now we're trying a different, newer version, but I'm still not buying it. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, but more technologies will come. We'll continue to be curious, and we will explore them.
Okay. Thomas, you just said, hey, you've used, where were you, in Italy somewhere? That's the first time you've actually downloaded it.
Yeah.
Was it because you saw a risk, also maybe for Personio as an organization, to use AI in the different product teams that you have? Or
yeah, I think for us there's kind of two ways. There's kind of the using it to help customers and using it to help ourselves internally. I think when it comes to us internally, we had the content writing test, I will call it, that didn't go so well. I think now they're trying something new. I think for us internally, we currently don't really have it very structured, to be honest. I think there's kind of every PM going a bit kind of off by themselves, and maybe sometimes making a joke in the beginning of a document of saying like, this was still written without ChatGPT and those kind of things. I will say I've recently used the Reforge plugin in Chrome, the Chrome extension. That was actually quite helpful, just to kind of, it lives in Google Docs, and you can basically just hit it and say like, I wrote a PRD, like critique it, and then just go through it. I like it because it's very clear in its use case. But as a company, we don't have kind of that established. Looking towards our users, it's a bit of a mixed thing. So we are working on providing kind of the base layer for all of our teams to use these things, and there's a lot of privacy stuff. There's a lot of kind of, are we allowed to use this, and which environments and which constraints. The piece that we're now soon launching, I need to think if I'm allowed to say that actually. Forgot what the recent guidance was. Anyway, helping with finding answers to questions on how to use the product. So kind of support cases. That's kind of the very low level starting while we figure out the bigger piece. But I think also for us, to be very honest, our users, like we're an HR platform, and a lot of our users come from spreadsheets, and they're just happy with having basic automation and having a easy-to-use database and having a way that people can log in, log their attendance, log their absences. And I think actually there's quite a lot of stuff that there's still for us to grow in that area. And for example, absences and attendance, you wouldn't believe how incredibly complex that is once you go to, say, 4 countries. And there's just so much that we can do there first that we need as a base layer. Like if, for example, if an HR team still needs to calculate the holiday balance for every employee separately, and they don't care about your stupid AI thing. That's the basic job that you need to automate and take away first, and kind of say like, yeah, here's your policy, we pick it, apply it, we take care of the rest. That's what they care, that's the problem that they have, and I don't think we should ask Gen AI to write accrual policy. Probably some politician will have something against that. So I think that's kind of where we are and kind of focusing on that. And so for us, it's a lot about kind of having the platform capability and then finding very specific use cases for it. We do have some very clear ones in where we have a lot of qualitative data. I work on the service product. That's a lot of qualitative data, so we want to get there first. But again, if you can't run a survey and if you can't analyze the quantitative data first, you don't care about the Gen AI feature.
Yeah, so the bigger change might be still in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
If all the different changes you just mentioned are being executed and demands of the end user becomes higher, then
and I think also for us it's
still
kind
in
of
flux. Then it keeps being
I think for us it's also the trade-off between kind of do we want to figure out all the hallucination and response and training and development of all that, or do we just keep a track on it, keep curious about it, and when the time is right, kind of grab it and go in, because it then will become a table stake feature, and we certainly have to add it. But do we need to be at the forefront? In some areas, but not in a lot.
Yeah, that also seems to me that the change is not even close to being done, or the changing times are not close to being done. It might be hard for teams if their roles, their responsibilities, their way of working is constantly changing. How do you keep your teams motivated? Hanneke, how is that for you? How do you make sure that, because it might be very confusing now and then.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's one side is also part of the job. I think organizations always change and that flexibility is needed. Personally, I think it's also the moment you work together for a longer period and you really almost become friends or you care about each other. I think you work for each other and you help make each other's work better. So I think it's almost a bit of a culture, a change management type of question, but I feel if you care about your team and you truly feel appreciated, then you run the extra mile for your colleagues as well. And I think that's a constant challenge that we're under, and especially since we're quite a new organization, there is sometimes some friction on who owns what and who can decide on what. And I think what I see, the longer you work with people, you've been through bumpy times, that usually helps to know how people are and get friendly. So I do think that's also next to culture and values of a company, it's almost like a personal connection to the team that you really care. Yeah.
Heather, would you say you do the same? Like, is it also, for example, within recruitment that you hire for a different colleague maybe to join the product teams compared to how you would do years ago?
I'm going to yes and everything that you're putting out here, actually. Yes, so and definitely with hiring. So I would say we're also trying to be, transparent when we do have change that's coming. That we are creating that trust and transparency about what and why. And if we're sometimes it could be that we're figuring out the how and being transparent about that as well. When we're hiring, it's I think a process of like understanding what superpowers do we already have. And what new superpowers do we want to bring in, and looking for that.
Okay. See, we're almost running out of time. So maybe what might be nice, we've been talking about uncertainty as an opportunity. Maybe your final tips and tricks for the audience. What can they do as individuals or within their organization to stay up to date about the latest trends, how that they can develop themselves to deal with all these changes that happen constantly around them. Maybe we can go from left to right. So maybe, Hanneke, you can take it away with your final tip to the audience.
I think my tip would be, obviously there's a lot of technical disruptions and it's very interesting to read and to understand what it does. But I would really advocate for a human-centered approach, so to keep it real and to really try and understand what is the problem we're trying to solve, and are we actually solving this, or are we just trying to plug in some cool AI and make something no one's waiting for? So I think that being honest to yourself, and at some point also with the team, not being scared to stop doing things and really pivot and try something new, which requires some bravery. But I think that it's still all about humans in the end, I would say.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Heather?
Speaking of humans, I would say talk to somebody here that you haven't talked to already, and try to learn from someone else.
Yeah, I think when it comes to kind of company and personal, I would say you already have a community in your company, right? So maybe just find a place, I don't know if you have a random channel or so, just kind of start instituting it there, and people go through different things and just have a place to share it, discuss it. Maybe have like a brown bag session or so, whatever you're interested in, but kind of make time for it, but institutionalize that making time for it so you actually do it. I think that's number one. I think personally, I would say find a way how you quickly and easily consume things and then double down on that. So if you say like, for example, I hate watching videos, I'm totally a newsletter reader, and a little bit of a podcast listener, but I'm all in on newsletters, so I have like 4 or 5 that I regularly read, and I think they just give me a good pulse. And sometimes I cycle through them and maybe pick a new one. So that's kind of what I picked for myself. I think I will make one exception in terms of podcast and give a very specific one that I really like. It's called Unsolicited Feedback, if you have heard about it. Some did, some do. It's from the folks who do Reforge, and I think it's basically you're just allowed to listen in to great product thinkers discuss the latest trends, and it just always opens my mind to how you can take in information, how you can dissect it, how you can, what stuff is happening. So yeah, highly recommend it. It's also quite easy to listen, so you can do it while you do something else. So special shout out to that one.
Yeah, so I think to summarize what they've just said, it's about sharing knowledge, talk to each other, keep the human-centric design, and I think being here today is the perfect place to do so. So I know there is a coffee break once I stop talking, so please enjoy the remainder of your day, and again, give it up for this amazing panel.